I think we'll get started now. Welcome to our first parent forum for the school year. My name is Karen Beasy, and I am the president of the Parent Council, and we're really glad you're here. I wanted to let you know that City of Edina is taping this program, so it will be shown on channel access. So this is our first attempt for doing this. It'll probably be shown like within 2 weeks, so it takes them about 2 weeks. So if you want to share the information or tell a neighbor or friend to watch it, it might be very valuable. So we're very thankful. Brian arranged that to have Aaron here to tape the program. So that's why I'm using this microphone, but it's not really a microphone for the room. So if you can't hear us, just speak louder, but we're real excited to have you. I'd also like to introduce Kirby Hershey and Cindy Wood. They're the Parent Forum chairs, and so they helped organize this whole evening, so I really appreciate their work on Parent Council. Thank you. And then right now I'm going to explain a little bit about the format for tonight. We have two parents. They're going to explain some experiences around this topic of underage drinking and parent liability. And then we have Ed Cohen, who is a criminal defense attorney, and we have Brian Hubbard, who is a City of Edina police officer and also the Edina High School liaison. So we're very thankful that you're all here tonight. So right now I'm going to give a little bio about each person, and then that'll kind of take care of that. Ann Satterwaite is a mother of 3 boys, 20, 19, 17, and 1 girl, 15. She is also the small group coordinator for the Moms of Teens program at Christ Presbyterian Church for 8 years. And this year she is program director of the monthly speaker series. She has hosted dozens of parties from 5 teens to 120 teens at her house, including scouts, soccer, band, swim teams, and she has a church youth group that meets at her house each Wednesday, 60 sophomores, and she does recommend a good carpet cleaner after all those kids come to visit. And then Ed Cohen, he is our criminal defense lawyer for over 20 years. He has tried cases throughout the state, and you've won more than you've lost. So that's good. Since 2006, he is one of the founders of Smart Start Minnesota. Smart Start provides ignition interlock services throughout Minnesota and gets drivers who are arrested for DUI back on the road safely and sober. And he also has 3 children in the Edina schools. He has an 11th grader, a 7th grader, and an 8th grader. And then Brian Hubbard is our police officer, City of Edina police officer, and he's been with the police in Edina since 2007, and he's had many different assignments, and his latest assignment is the one here at the high school in the fall as a school resource officer. But one of his, interesting that he does co-host the department's Beyond the Badge TV show, cable TV show, so that's kind of fun to watch you on TV. But you've also he's had 16 years experience at the YMCA as like a camp director, a youth worker, an executive director, so lots of experience with youth. And Brian and his wife Heather have 3 children, and they live in New Hope. So welcome, Brian. And then I guess a little bit about myself. Karen Beasy. I also have 3 daughters. One's a sophomore in college, and I have an 11th grader and an 8th grader. And so kind of how this this topic started, was we had a little experience that happened in our family this past summer. And I kind of asked my daughter, I said, well, I think I'm going to share this story, with everyone. And she was like, oh, please don't, please don't. But I'm trying not to use her name, but you'll probably figure out who it is. But she she is, she came back. She graduated from Edina High School. She was captain of the swim team. She was on the marching band. She was newspaper person at Zephyrus, in our church group. So in high school, we didn't have one problem. No drinking, no speeding tickets, no, good grades. She was always in on time, not one problem. Then she went away to college. And so she came back, and then at one weekend, she's age 19, our family says, we're going to the cabin, but you can stay home this weekend. Because I'm thinking she's 19, she can be on her own. And I'm just sharing this experience with other parents to just say, I can't believe it happened to us. So then what happened was she did invite one friend over, which turned out to be about 10 friends, which turned out to be about 20. It wasn't a big party, but then the police, our finest city of Edina, showed up, five police cars at about 3 a.m. in the morning, and they arrested her for underage drinking and open house ticket. And so what was interesting was she did refuse to let any police officers into our house. And the police officers, I'd have to say, one minute I'm mad at them, and the other minute I'm grateful for them because they did keep the kids safe. Nobody left the house. They stayed there till 6 a.m. in the morning. They called all the cars that were on the street, and they notified the parents of the party. And then because of that, she had to go to court. We had to hire an attorney. She had an underage drinking ticket, which was $400. Then she also had to be evaluated by a chemical health person, counselor, and that was a $200 1-hour session. And then she also had to do 24 hours of community service. So we also, my husband and I received an open house ticket. And luckily our attorney got that thrown out, and we didn't have to go to jail or pay a fine. That could be up to $1,000 fine or 90 days in jail. And I thought that wouldn't be great for the president of the parent council to be in jail. So, we laugh about it, but it also was pretty stressful for us this summer. But we got through it. It was a learning lesson for our whole family, and especially for our children. And that's why I want to share the story with other parents, and all my friends know about it. I kind of, share these things so that other people can learn from them too. So sometimes you think it's not going to happen to me, and it does, and they say, now what? So that's kind of how I asked Cindy and Kirby. I said, what do you think about this topic, to get the word out and to get information from other parents and Ed and Brian. So that kind of starts the talk for the evening, and then I'm going to pass it on to Anne, and she's going to share some of her experiences.
Okay, yes, I'm Anne Satterthwaite, bugger of a name to pronounce, but the first thing I want to say is I don't want people to be afraid of teenagers. We look at our kids, and they're kind of big and they're hairy, and that's the guys, not the girls. Some of them are hairy too, but and it's intimidating. And in my house, I'm the shortest one, and I'm not short. And so you have all these kind of big kids rampaging around. But I want to encourage you, even though some of our experiences aren't what we wanted, to be the houses that welcome these kids so that we can create as safe an environment as you can for them. The kids are going to hang out somewhere. And after our oldest kid hit 9th grade, he was on the high school swim team. He was hanging out at other high school swimmers, and they're busy, and they're really pretty good kids, but they are kids. Their frontal lobes haven't quite developed. And we got kind of nervous. A lot of the places he wanted to go to, we didn't know the parents. We didn't know who was going to be there. We didn't know who was driving. And we came to the conclusion we needed to be the house that would hopefully draw kids. So we did sit down with our kids. 4 teenagers, and said, what would make our house attractive, other than obviously, hey, open house, right? Mm-hmm. That makes it attractive, but that's not the kind of attractive house you want to be. So we went with whatever suggestions we could afford. They wanted a TV that was younger than they were. That seemed reasonable. They wanted a hot tub. We actually had room for it. It was very expensive, so that was a family Christmas gift. We saved up for that and made that happen. We repainted the room. They didn't like the failed coral scheme. It looked like pink to them. So it was little things. We involved them in this to make this a place that they would welcome their friends to. And then I have had many, many, many parties. A lot are just impromptu on the weekends, but a lot are the big band parties after pops or during band camp. I've had swimming parties. Oddly enough, kids after swimming all night want to go get in a hot tub. I don't know. They like being wet. I've had all male, a lot of all male. My first 3 are male and also male-female parties as well. Katie is sophomore, hasn't yet had any big parties at our house, but I'm sure that'll come. But we want to be welcoming for them, so we, just like when you had toddlers, you didn't put them in your room with all your valuables. You set the scene, you removed temptations, work with your kids, just even little toys from childhood sitting around. Kids are going to goof with them. If it's going to bother your kids that stuff might get broken, put it away. Certainly any alcohol within the level they're going to be on, put it away. Have plenty of drinks you want them to have. You got pop. We're not a big pop family. We got a fridge full of pop. You wouldn't know that we're not a big pop family. We have frozen pizzas. We have things to draw the kids, particularly with boys. Food works. Lure the boys with the food. Girls, I haven't quite figured that one out yet. Maybe I'd lure the girls with the boys. I don't know. Haven't yet got that far. But so set the scene. Look for what will be problems. When kids come to your house, greet them at the door. Say, welcome to our home. Make sure they know this is your home. This is not some random shack where they're going to have a party. This is your home. You are welcoming them. A lot of those kids, you'll probably know, my problem is I've got this blindness about teenagers. They all look the same to me. They're like from central casting or something. And so even kids I knew when they were little, I don't recognize them. They've got contacts and facial hair and breasts and all these things. So, but they don't know that I don't recognize them. And so, and I hope they don't watch this, which they won't. But, so I look them in the eye. I say, welcome. Hey, I haven't seen your mom for a couple weeks. How's she doing? And let them know, whether that's true or not, that I run into their parents, that I'm going to be here, that I recognize them, whether I do or not. So again, there's accountability. They know this is somebody's home. So this is how I've set the scene. Not all things always go according to plan. So we did have, a couple years ago, we had a end of the year swimming party. And you learn each time too. Just like with toddlers, you think you got everything set and then they go do something. You go, ooh, I didn't even think about that. So after each party, you reassess and you figure out, okay, this was more of a hazard than I realized. So one of the things that happened by good luck was at the end of the state party, my son, who is a captain, said, we knew the party was going to be at our house. It was going to be an overnight. What I didn't expect was there were going to be a lot of girls there too. So he did tell me as he was going to get on the bus, oh, a whole lot of girls have been invited too. I don't know, about 50. Okay, we're not going to have enough pizza. It turned out to be a really good thing because I had pre-ordered pizza. But I ran by Jerry's on the way home, and I picked up bake-at-home pizzas. What a good idea. Every 13 minutes, I'm coming through the room with a hot pizza. You're welcome, and you can check. You can see what people are doing, say hello to kids. It's an opportunity. In addition to filling the chips in the classic one, bringing down cookies, bringing down pizza as you go. Again, use the food. It helps. Gives you a good reason to be down there and chat with people. But this was unexpected, and I wasn't used to girls. And it's different because I kind of knew I'd dealt a lot with boys. One thing I didn't think about was purses, right? So the boys come in, and they got their sweatpants and everything, and they don't bring suits. They don't need swimsuits for that tub. But I think they had some. They just come from swimming. But they all kind of go shuffling downstairs, and I know them all really pretty well. I've seen them swim for years. But a bunch of the girls come. I know some of them. I don't know some of them. And, oh, by the way, because now a lot more people have invited, word's getting out. Cell phones, right? So luckily I was there. I was circulating. I saw, 3 kids stand in the corner, kind of texting, looking fishy. And I went down. I said, who invited you? We heard it was an open party. I said, well, you heard wrong. This is a private party. They said, well, it's a really lame party. I said, that's fine because it's not your party. Feel free to have the confidence. This is your house. And even if they're kind of, big guys couple, they're not generally looking for trouble. Just send them on their way. They can go cause their trouble somewhere else. Obviously not the same if they're drinking. Then you might need to find out if somebody can drive them home. These kids were just kind of at the wrong party. But it did turn out what I didn't expect. Some girls apparently had snuck in little bottles of alcohol. I checked cups as they came in. If they had a cup in their hand, I said, here's your option. Take it back to the car. Cups, cans, anything. Or you can give me some of it to drink. Hate coffee, and a lot of them brought coffee. Yuck. But some of them said, have a sip. So I did. Took a lot of sips of coffee. But I said, that's your deal. Other kids halfway through said, oh, I've got to go get my Arnie Palmer's from the car. Well, you got a lot of drinks in the fridge. Well, I want Arnie Palmer's. Fine. If you go, you don't come back. Don't feel bad about setting those kind of clear rules. If you don't want them to touch something like a treadmill, put up a sign that says, do not touch. Don't be subtle. They're okay with that. Better to set the rules so they know. But these girls did. I didn't pick it up during the night. I was down circulating. I was talking to people up close. Didn't smell any alcohol. Did not see anyone particularly inebriated at all. I don't think there was a lot. At 1 o'clock, I kicked all the girls out. I said the boys could have ice cream sundaes if all the girls were gone by 1, which they got them out. And then they turn on a movie and the guys all go to sleep. I do find if you separate the sexes at some point, that also cuts down a lot of the temptation to be cool. I think. That's my personal opinion. But I did hear after the fact, another mom said, well, I heard there was drinking at your party. Well, I know there wasn't excessive. I did everything in my power to prevent it. There was a lot of snow outside and their shoes were in the front hall. So they could have gone around the side of the house, but you got to really want it to go through 3 feet of snow. That was a really snowy year. So I learned. So the next year we had the same party, and I said to the captains, got them together, plan ahead, and you can save yourself a lot of trouble. Do you want to invite outsiders other than the core team? If so, I want a list, and I'm going to check them in. If they're not on the list, they're not coming. And when the girls came in, they had their bags. I said, welcome to our house. Feel free to put your bag in the master bedroom. It's the nicest bathroom. That's where you can change when you want to use the hot tub. Oh, no, I need my purse. That's fine. Your purse is going to be safe in there. Oh, no, I need my purse. Then I'd have to ask to check it, which I did. But on the whole, they just put it in there. I had a parent watching it. That's another thing. Work with other parents. Get other parents there so they can take turns going downstairs. It's not always you. Your kid will say, you're going to ruin my social life. Didn't happen. They made it through high school so far. So anyway, that's kind of my experience. Stuff can happen, even with your best of intentions. Just plan ahead. Learn from it. Go back and work with other parents. One thing I always do is I tell all the neighbors around me we're going to have a party. Let me know if you hear anything inappropriate. When I'm gone, call me if you see cars in front of my house and my teens are there, and tell your teens. I told all the neighbors. They love you for it. But they actually do. My kids have thanked me for being at those parties because they didn't have to be the bad guy and turf out people that they didn't want there. So.
Thank you, Ann. I forgot to mention that we're each going to do our part, and then we'll have questions at the end. And so if you have any questions, we'll have about a half an hour for questions at the end. So I think at this point, Brian is going, the police officer.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. I told the group that was planning that the good news is that when there's a turnout like this is an important message to get out. The bad news is that there's probably the people that are here or maybe the people who don't need to hear the message as much. So I appreciate you taking this topic seriously and spending some time being here. I have kind of a few things that the planning committee asked me to kind of explain or go over. The cop always gets to be the bad guy. That's just the part of the shtick. And so I get to go home and be the bad guy to the three little ones, and then I get to go to work and be the bad guy to everybody else. One of the things I was asked to talk about, because it's always a little nebulous, is what's the role of the school resource officer? And especially when I talk to people, they go, "You work at Edina High School? What does Edina High School need a cop for?" This is my full-time assignment. I'll be here for 4 years. And it's a hard job now that I'm 3-4 months into it to kind of put into articulable words. I've kind of described it as I really am just another body here, another caring body to help make this place function. There's 2,100 people in this building every day. There's lots of stuff that happens. Is there crime that happens? Sure. Hopefully, as many of you know, we had kind of some theft problems early on. With some cell phones and some other stuff. I think we've curbed that problem. So we do have some crime that happens from time to time, but a vast majority of my time is spent in a support role. I have students or parents or teachers calling, emailing, coming in with random questions, law enforcement related or not. If we have issues that happen out in the community that affect our students, those get funneled to me and I kind of help process through them. If we have crimes that involve students out in the community that are students here, I will get involved with that. I also support all of the other schools in the building, or all of the other schools in the district. But really, I am just a resource. And so on one of the blue packets that's up there, I'd encourage you to grab it because the front page, I put my contact info on there. I welcome you to call with any question. And again, a vast majority of what I do has nothing to do with law enforcement. Sometimes a student comes into the office, and my office kind of sits between the principals and the counselors, and the office staff will bring the student around looking at offices to see where someone's there, and I happen to be the one there, and they come on in and we'll figure it out. And a lot of times I'm just helping direct them to the right person. You can also tell your students, because they're all scared of the cop, I don't wear this during the day normally to not be so scary, but I keep candy on my desk. And I do have a couple of sophomore girls who every day skip gym class early as they're going into change to come in and get some candy. So all I require is that they introduce themselves to me. So really, I'm just a resource, and I encourage you to tell your sons and daughters that if they need something, if they have a question, if they just need to close the door and go, this is what's going on, that's what I'm here for. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the trends that we see and kind of make you aware of some of the laws that you may or may not be aware of regarding many of these topics. The trends in a suburban area like Edina are pretty clear. We know that alcohol use is prevalent amongst high school students. We know that tobacco use is, I wouldn't say prevalent, but certainly not uncommon. Marijuana use would suggest to not be on the decline from what we've seen. And then the alarming trend, especially in our area, is an increase in the use of prescription pills. And that is becoming more and more alarming to us for a number of reasons, none the least of which is you all know that your bodies are programmed a certain way, and if the doctor says you take this pill for this, if somebody else takes it, you don't know what the effects are going to be. But we are continuing to see an increase in the use of prescription medication by young people that they're finding in medicine chests, in friends' medicine chests, your stuff, whatever. And so that's of concern. Many of you are familiar with the Minnesota Student Survey. It's a self-appraised survey where they, every 3 years, is it, Bruce? Every 3 years, students across the state are given this test and asked about risky behaviors and asked them to self-evaluate what is their use. The last time that a study was done in Edina was 2010, and for me, I look at some of these and I go, some of these numbers are staggering, and as parents, I think we have to be concerned with it. One of the questions is alcohol use in the past 30 days. Now, what you have to remember about this is it's a self-reported study. So most of us who look at things like this recognize that There are people who report, and then there's a group of people who don't report. So this number to me is always going to be a low number. Our number showed that 56% of boys and 50% of girls in the 12th grade are have used alcohol in the past 30 days. Binge drinking, which is considered 5 or more drinks in a row, which for any of us in this room would be enough for us to be staggered, use for 12th graders was 40%. The average in Minnesota is 24%. That should be a concerning statistic for a community like Edina. Marijuana use in the past year for 12th graders, 41%. State average for 12th graders is 31%. Equally alarming when I look at this is, again, self-reported, 12% of 9th graders in the district say they've used marijuana in the past year. And then marijuana use in the last 30 days, 38% of 12th grade boys say that they have used marijuana in the past 30 days. And the average is 25% in Minnesota. So our numbers are, I would argue, substantially higher. Part of the concern when we look at something like this is, I would argue, as the bad guy in this, that if 50% of our students are regularly using alcohol or have used alcohol in the last year, I have a difficult time believing that 50% of our students are using and their parents at some level are not aware of it. And what becomes concerning to that is that I believe we become complacent in, well, either we did it or we know that kids do it, it's part of what they're going to do, and we allow it to be acceptable behavior. And unfortunately, we know that that risky behavior leads to multiple other risky behaviors, which is what we become concerned about. If you have this blue packet, I'm just going to call your attention to a few things in there. If not, there's some there. I just want to make you aware of a number of laws. I'm going to go through this really quick just to give you a snapshot, and then we'll have some time for questions if you want some clarification. Hennepin County has a countywide curfew by county ordinance. If you're not aware of it, it's a firm curfew in Edina. We enforce that curfew vigorously. Why? Because the curfew is there. Because the reality is, as you can see here, if you're under 12 years old and you're on the street at 10:30 at night, there's nothing good that you're going to be doing. We would argue the same thing with those in the 15 to 17-year-old age group, that on the weekends, if you're out and about at 1:30, there's really nothing good for you to be doing. Obviously, we know there's some exceptions to that, but vast majority of that statement is true. There are some exceptions to the curfew laws. If you're coming home from work, if you're coming home from a sanctioned school function, there's a number of asterisks which make you then not falling under the curfew ordinance. But if you look like you're under 18 and you're in this city, you are going to be stopped. We're going to identify you and make sure that you're where you're supposed to be, and we're going to get you home. And the other thing I should mention as we go through this is, I don't know how many of you have any personal relationships with cops, but as was suggested, I had a 17-year career with the YMCA prior to making a midlife career change and going into this world, and most of that time was in youth work. My concern is for people. My concern is for kids. My concern is not to go around busting folks. No cop that I work with takes delight in going to an open house party, partly because they are a huge hassle, and there's a lot of paperwork that goes with it. But we know that the results of not doing that are way more hassle for all the people who are affected by that. Alcohol, the law obviously is you have to be 21 to drink, possess, any of that. If you are under that, you will be cited for it. It's a citable offense if you're 18 to 20. You'll receive a citation and released if we can find a sober way for you to leave. If you are under 18, you'll receive a citation, and we will basically take custody of the young person until we can find a parent or a guardian to take responsibility for them. It is illegal to sell or provide alcohol to anybody that is not of age. So not just sale, but if they're in your house and you provide it, you can be cited for that. And it would be important to note two things about that. One, you can be cited simply because it's in your house and they had access to it. It doesn't mean you actually have to pull the tap and pour it and hand it to them. If it's in your house and they get access to it, you have provided it because they had access to it when you were there. That would be important to note. The second thing to note of that would be being charged with that particular offense, providing to a minor, is a gross misdemeanor offense for the person that's offending it. So It's a pretty serious charge. Some tobacco laws.
You said something interesting, and I just want to ask before I forget. You said while you are there.
Well, yeah, thank you for clarifying. If you had reason to know that there was alcohol there and reason to know that there were young people there that could get access to it, that would meet the definition of the crime. So if you didn't know that the party was going on, the gathering was happening, and some students came over and they weren't supposed to be over, and they got access to it, then the argument would be that you didn't intend for that to happen. Good clarification. And again, I'm going real quick, but we'll be happy to clarify stuff. Tobacco. Tobacco is illegal if you're under 18. Purchase, possess, use, sell, all of those things. There can be some ramifications to your driver's license. If you receive a second citation or beyond for use of tobacco under 18, your driver's license can be suspended for that. That would be something that a lot of folks don't know. Marijuana is illegal. Paraphernalia is illegal. And paraphernalia can be anything that we define as something that can be used in the act of drug use. So if it's a baggie that's got residue in it, if it's a grinder, if it's a scale, if it's a pipe, if it's anything that appears to be paraphernalia that's affiliated with the use of marijuana, you'd be charged with that. Obviously illegal for everybody. For now, I was talking a little bit earlier about what's going to happen with the law. I don't know what's going to happen with the law. I don't get to decide that. I just have to enforce what they give me. Specific, important to understand about any drug violations and any alcohol violations by state law. If one of my partners cites somebody tonight for consumption, so they were drinking, they got a ticket for consumption, I get that report. I turn that report into a different report, and by state statute, I'm required to notify the school of that offense. And so then the school will take its action, which primarily, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Bruce, primarily at this point affects students who are involved in activities, either athletics or some other kind of activity. And the State High School League says there's a 2-week sanction, 2 weeks or 2 games, that they are suspended by State High School League. So we make that notification of every student because we don't have any way, my partners don't have any way of knowing what activities they're involved in. So there are some broader ramifications for folks. And interestingly, in my time here, as we've had contact, a lot of students kind of put those two pieces together when it's probably a little too late. You're the star on the basketball team, you're in the cheerleading squad, you're whatever, and then realize, uh-oh, no, this has got a broader reaching effect than just this little juvenile ticket that I got. So something to keep in mind. I listed some driving laws in there. I don't think parents are quite aware of all the driving laws that are in place. I'm not going to go over them except to say this. It would be important for you to know that if you have a child under the age of 18 that lives in your home, you have the right to say you don't have a driver's license. There's a 1-page form, I'd be happy to give it to you, that you sign and say they are no longer eligible. And so if you have rules and you're not sure that they're being followed with cars, with curfew, with whatever, you know, if nothing else, you can have the form filled out and put it right on the refrigerator and say, hey, get in line here, or this is what's going to happen. And then it is as legit as if the state takes their license away. You fill that out, send it in, their license is null and void. That's a tool that you have as parents that I don't think the state has probably done a great job of talking about. And then the last area that I'll talk about with alcohol is underage drinking and driving is separate than DWI laws. If you are arrested for DWI as a 17-year-old, it's treated like a DWI for anybody. Most of the offenses I've already explained are considered status offenses, meaning that they're juvenile, they're handled in the juvenile court. Traffic violations are, with few exceptions, handled in regular court. So if you get a DWI, it's handled like a DWI. If you do not meet the .08 threshold, so you're a .01 or 02 as determined roadside, then you can be charged with underage drinking and driving, which is a separate offense. Comes with a whole separate set of penalties, license, suspension, or revocation, etc. And then the last one that I will talk about is the city of Edina, like many cities, has an open house party ordinance. I've given you a copy of the ordinance. Basically, as has been alluded, the ordinance basically says if there is a party going on at your residence that has young people involved in illegal activity, or older people, if there was an adult party and it was a big pot party, that would meet this threshold. Obviously, we more deal with it in the youth area. If there is alcohol consumption or marijuana use that is happening at the party, then either you, or if you don't know about it, your son or daughter, can be charged by city ordinance with this violation of the open house party, which you've already heard a little bit about. And the thing that would be important, the only other thing in here is just a little pointer for you, talking about kids staying in school. A few laws about truancy, et cetera, I just put in there as another thing you can put on the refrigerator if they start lipping off to you. Let me move into house parties real quick for a minute. So the ordinance covers open house parties. One of the myths, I think, is that the cops in Edina, all 2, 3, 4, 5 of them that are working the streets in the middle of the night for a city this size, are randomly driving around all weekend just waiting to pounce on a bunch of students having a party at a house. That is obviously not the case. We only go to a location because we've received a call. Neighbor calls and says, there are people coming in and out of this house, there are people loud, there's cars screeching all over the place, whatever it is. We get a disturbance call, that's what prompts us to be there, not us randomly driving around. We drive through city streets all the time, and there's streets covered with cars that obviously mean there's a bunch of people someplace. We don't walk door to door looking in windows trying to find them. We get there because someone has called us. And then when we get there, we have a responsibility to act. So the ordinance is very clear. A couple things that I was asked to clarify. Regarding entry, law is very clear on this. I can't make entry into somebody's private residence. We have a constitution here. All of us know it very well, and we try to abide by it excellently. If I get to your house, I knock on the door, and nobody answers, I can't go into your house. If I knock on the door and there are 75 people in that house yelling and screaming and opening the windows and giving me all kinds of hand gestures, I can't make entry into the house. I have to be invited into the house by somebody in order to get in there. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't find other tactics. And again, not because my partners would rather not be doing something else during that time, but because we feel a responsibility to help deal with that. So we're going to walk up and down the street, and we're going to write down license plates, and we're going to call the dispatcher and say, can you find these phone numbers, and call all those people and say, do you know that that car is parked outside of a place that we believe there is underage consumption going on? And so we try and find other ways to do it. If we really are concerned about it, we'll camp outside, because our concern is we don't want someone who already has been driving for 6, 8 months, a year and a half, to get in a car now intoxicated and do whatever's going to happen. And so we try and curb this problem. The one exception to the entry rule would be if we have an exigent circumstance. Typically when we get there, we'll knock on the door, nobody answers. We will walk around the house to see what's going on, and I'll look in every window I can to see what's going on. If I look in there and see someone who appears to be passed out, they're lying in a pool of their own vomit, they're bleeding, whatever, they're being assaulted, that then allows us the ability to make entry based on the circumstance that somebody is in immediate danger. So understand that. The other blue sheet that I put over there actually comes from Virginia, but I found it and I thought it was really very good. A lot of the things that Ann mentioned. It's a guide for parent hosting of parties. And I don't know that I can say it any better than Ann, who's had the experience. To me, what has changed from all of our times is, if I had a party, I wrote a note to somebody and you told anybody that you knew, and that's how the word got around to maybe 45 people if we were really lucky. Now I pop it on Facebook, and now the entire city of Edina and Richfield and Eden Prairie know that this party is going on. My argument would be, in my house, I'll decide what the access is going to be. Part of the problem with house parties in this city, in my opinion, is parents expect their young person to be the person who's the bad guy and says, nope, you can't be here. They just can't. The peer pressure and the stuff that goes with that, I think, is totally impossible. And so it needs to be up to the parent to go, nope, you don't belong here. I think greeting folks is an excellent idea, because they know this isn't going to be one of those free-for-all deals, because here I am. How are you? Come on in. I'll be keeping an eye on things. I think you need to be vigilant. It is alarming to me how many house parties we go to that are supervised, and there are kids all over the place coming out windows, running through the backyard, and I go to make contact with an adult, and the adult is probably more impaired than many of the students that I will come in contact with. Well, that obviously doesn't equate to good supervision of what's going on. And so I would argue that if you're having a party, even though you may have a couple friends over to help supervise, that would be a zero tolerance kind of a deal. So I would say that. Two last things that I will mention. A question came up about PBTs, the little portable breath tests that we use roadside. What I want you to understand simply about that is not a legal measurement for a DWI. So if I'm going to arrest you for DWI and you agree to blow into that, that's just giving me a gauge. That doesn't go in my report. I can't testify to it in court. Any other offense other than DWI, it does become a legal instrument that I will use. So if I'm with a young person and they blow into it, whatever it reads, that's what I'm going to put in my report. That's what I will testify to. So that would be important to know. And it is important to know that you can refuse the PBT. You're not required in any circumstance to blow into that. Your students are not required. We can't obviously force them to do that. But then we'll just go based on what we have. And a lot of times I'm asking you to do a PBT because I've seen lots of other things that have led me to believe that there's something going on. But important to know that that can be refused. And then the last thing I would say is one of my concerns in the last couple years as I've gotten to know the Edina community better is I am increasingly concerned with the party bus thing. And so don't let your students watch this because I'm not giving a message that everybody wants to hear. I don't think party buses inherently are bad, but I do know how party buses operate as a general rule, and I think some parents allow the party bus to happen assuming that there's an adult driver driving that bus and they're supervising. And let me rest you assured that party bus, or that driver, is paying attention to driving. They are not paying attention to one thing, legal or not, that's going on behind them. I'm obviously throwing this all together, but as a general rule. And so I strongly suggest if you have young people that are doing party buses to and from dances or other functions, that really needs to be watched carefully. I mean, I struggle with putting my 16-year-old onto a vehicle that's only lit with black lights and has 2 or 3 stripper poles in the middle of it. That's a struggle for me. I know lots of people do it, and so be it, but I think that parents need to be vigilant in how that situation's being supervised, both as students are getting on and as students are getting off. Not to say they can't sneak stuff on, but I would suggest a word of caution because homecoming, for instance, I'm going to suggest I watched 60% of the students who left here left before the dance was done and left in a party bus, which neither of those two things inherently are bad. I'm concerned about what happens on that bus that's totally not supervised in that party, college-y, adult atmosphere that they're not necessarily quite at a spot that they can grip. So I would just urge some caution on that.
My turn, huh? Thanks. I have a little presentation to cover some of the things that we've talked about. When Kirby asked me to do this, she asked me to come at this from my experience defending people for the past 20 years. As they said, I am a criminal defense lawyer, and I've done this now since 1992, so I'm lucky that this is 20 years of doing this. The remote? Which one? Power. There we go. Oh, I think we can go. We're okay with the lights, I think. So when she asked me to talk about this today, she suggested that I come at it from my experience practicing criminal law and talk a little bit about house parties and dances and things of that nature. So I thought about it a little bit. And really part of my approach is we're really talking about the fact that most of our mothers said that nothing good ever happens after midnight. And I think along with what the officer said, I think some of that might be kind of true. couple of things I want to cover, and it's going to cover some of the same ground that he covered, but from a slightly different perspective. Some of the curfew issues, driving-related issues, consumption and possession issues, and some parental and social host liability. And I'm going to try to fly through this real quick so we can get to questions that you might have. Like he said, the curfew, the important one really is the 15 to 17-year-olds. We're talking about high school kids, we're talking about dances and parties, and the fact is, at any age less than 18, the curfew is midnight. 12:01, everybody turns into a pumpkin on the weekend. It's something that I don't think is thought about very hard when it comes to these house parties and these after parties for the dances. What you're doing is you're setting up a situation in which you're creating at least a likelihood that people are going to get pulled over. As the officer noted, there's a couple of affirmative defenses. One is a parental errand. This is the one that kills me. This is the one I've been hearing a lot of lately. Returning home from an official school, religious, or other recreational activity sponsored by a public entity or civic organization. And what kids seem to think is that because they're coming home at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning from an after party, that counts as coming from a school function. It doesn't. Just like the officer said, they will vigorously enforce curfew violations. Now, it's prosecuted as a petty misdemeanor. It's not a real crime. You can't go to jail for it. It's a finable offense, but it does create some problems. Like I said, it's not really a criminal offense, but it gives the police reasonable articulable suspicion, and this is the baseline that exists for the police to pull over somebody. So when you are out driving after midnight, it's always a bad idea, frankly, even as adults. But when you have kids who are out driving around after curfew, it creates a basis for the cops to pull you over, which essentially then leads to driving-related issues, provisional license limitations that exist, not a drop violations, and then DUIs and DWIs. The provisional license creates a little bit of its own reasonable suspicion for pulling people over. Your first 6 months, you can only have 1 passenger. After that, you're limited to 3 passengers in your first year of driving. I know this because I happen to have a brand new driver, and I keep reminding him that he can't be driving around with all of his friends piled into the car. They seem to forget that because their brains don't work real well. And more importantly, they don't understand the fact that this gives the police a reason to stop them. Now, if you're not doing anything wrong, that's fine. If the police stop you and you haven't done anything wrong, that's great. The problem is, too frequently, you have done something wrong. And when you're going to these parties, and just like Officer Hubbard says, you have 50% of the people who admit to drinking in the last 30 days, you have the likelihood that somebody somewhere is doing something wrong. So some of these things we're going to just touch on real quick. Alcohol possession, obviously illegal for anyone under 21 to possess. Some of the things that you may not know. It's a misdemeanor, it's a full crime. So even if you're 17 years old and you get pulled over for a traffic offense and it results in a consumption ticket or a possession ticket, you're looking at a misdemeanor. You will go to, generally you will go to traffic court. Not always though. Sometimes you will be prosecuted by the county. I've seen it happen both ways, frankly. Bigger problem is this, you're going to lose your license. If it's possession and you used a fake ID, it's going to be a minimum of 90 days. And again, most kids don't think about these consequences. Most parents don't know the consequences. So it's kind of important to talk this over with your kids so that they understand how serious some of the implications of their actions are. I will be the first to admit that when I was my son's age, I probably did things that I shouldn't have. It was a different time. It's a different world today. Everything that these kids do is looked at more closely. Everything that they do is going to result in an arrest. There aren't cops anymore who are going to just let you go, who are going to say, go on home. Obviously, sports and activity suspensions go along with this possession or consumption of alcohol.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
If the driver hasn't been drinking, but you know, they get pulled over because they got 2 or 3 kids in the car, and one of the other kids has, how does that reflect on that individual, the driver? What are all the implications of that?
It's all pretty fact specific, but the easy answer is probably this. As long as the driver hasn't been doing anything wrong, the driver's probably okay, unless it happens to be an open container. And then an open container can go against not only the person who has the open container, but the driver as well for allowing the open container. But more often than not, what's going to end up happening is the cop is going to pull them over, they're going to smell alcohol, they're going to get everybody out of the car and PBT all of them. If the driver happens to be clean, good for him. Smelling it alone is probably going to get them all tested, though. The not a drop violations. Any amount of alcohol consumption is illegal with one major exception, and that is you are allowed to consume alcohol in your parents' home only. With your parents' permission, you can consume alcohol. So if I wanted to let my son have a beer, that's fine, as long as he's at my house. He leaves my house, now it's consumption. If you leave the house with a beer, it's presumed that you will be going someplace else to drink that, and it's possession. So don't let him drink. I don't let him drink. You do whatever you want. Operating a motor vehicle after any consumption is prosecuted as a misdemeanor. You're going to be in traffic court. It's going to end up on your adult driving record. The not a drop violation does result in a 30-day license suspension, and the PBT that the officer talked about, getting everybody out of the car, having them blow into the roadside test, that can be used to prove the not a drop violation. At any level. I had a client once who happened to be an Edina student. He's no longer an Edina student, but he was at a house party. He claims he wasn't drinking. They asked him to take a test, and the result came back at .06, which, for anybody who knows, that is about it's about 7% of what a regular DUI would be. It's an extremely low amount. It's actually right up against the threshold of the device. He claimed he hadn't been drinking. He actually went to the trouble to go to the hospital to get a blood test to show that he hadn't been drinking. Unfortunately, what he didn't know is alcohol burns off out of your system so fast that within 20 minutes, even if it had been .06, it would have been gone. Luckily, the prosecutor ended up throwing the case out. But it just goes to show that any amount of alcohol can get you in a lot of trouble. It ended up costing this kid his senior year in a sport, and was a big, trial for him and his family. And then the worst of this is DUIs. Sorry about that. I don't like that one. But any driver who's driving or in physical control, and physical control can be almost anything. If you're standing outside of your car with the keys, that can be physical control. If you're walking around and there's no reason to even believe that you drove the vehicle, but you have the keys, that can be physical control too. Physical control is anything that somebody wants it to be and can result in a DUI. Over .08 blood alcohol concentration or any amount of non-prescribed controlled substance. Piggybacking off of what officer said, pills, Adderall, Xanax, anything that happens to be in your medicine cabinet, if anybody's taking that and it's not prescribed, and the police have any reason to believe that they're under the influence of anything, they can take you in and require a blood test. If that turns up in your system, you can be charged with a DUI, any amount. So if you took something last week that is long-lasting in your system and it's not prescribed for you, that can show up in your blood, that can be a DUI. It's going to be a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor offense unless it happens to be your fourth, and then it's a felony. But for most of the people we're talking about, it's going to be a first or second. It's really dependent on the alcohol level. Between .08 and .20, it's a misdemeanor. Above .20, it's a gross misdemeanor. Oops, sorry about that. Not going to be prosecuted as a juvenile. It's going to be prosecuted in an adult traffic court. The penalties for the first offense of a misdemeanor, the maximum penalty is 90 days in jail or a $1,000 fine. A second offense or a blood alcohol concentration over 0.20 is going to be prosecuted as a misdemeanor. You're looking at a maximum of 1 year in jail and a $3,000 fine. Now, honestly, that's not what's going to happen to somebody on their first or even their second offense. But it can. And it's all dependent on the facts, and it's all dependent on what a judge feels like sentencing you to. These are the maximum penalties. The administrative penalties also really hurt, and they hurt particularly for people who are under 18. You're looking at a minimum of 180-day license revocation. If the test result came back over 2.0, it would be 365 days. $700 reinstatement fee. And they're not eligible for the ignition interlock. Now, does anyone know what ignition interlock is? Okay. For those who don't, it's a breathalyzer on the car. And I'm not here selling my company at all, but I know a little bit about it because I had a lot to do with getting it here in Minnesota. Ignition interlock gives people who are over 18 the opportunity to get back driving with essentially a breathalyzer on their car. It prevents the car from starting if they're above 0.02 or a quarter of the legal limit. But unfortunately, the way the law is currently written, anyone under the age of 18 is not eligible for this. So it's a big burden on people who are responsible for those children, and another reason to really consider what they're doing is they're not eligible for this. Finally, there's, on 1 minute. Okay, social host liability, and I'll fly through this. Two main areas of concern, civil liability and criminal liability. The main one is civil liability, and there's a Social Host Liability Act in Minnesota that limits host responsibility. So for those of you who are having parties, you have to actively try to really get yourself liable for your actions at parties. I don't want to give you the idea that you should be lax in your care of for these parties, in watching what kids are doing. I think it's really important to do what was suggested, which is be really proactive. But in order to have liability, you have to really go out of your way. So essentially, you have to do one of two things. Either provide the alcohol to the kids who are under 21, or knowingly allow it to happen, or knowingly allow it to happen. Those are really the two examples of how it happens. So if you buy for them, you can be held liable ultimately. It's for any injuries or death that are caused by the intoxicated minor. Most homeowners insurance will exclude this from coverage. The only thing that it probably would not cover is if somebody was negligent in the supervision. So if you left home, I suspect, and had alcohol in your house and allowed it to be consumed, not intentionally, but just by simply having it there, that's probably negligent, but it's not going to be liability for you. Criminal liability is a little bit different. If you're purchasing or otherwise providing alcohol, it's a felony if it results in death or great bodily harm to either the person who was drunk or to anybody who they might hurt. So, much older case in which there was liability. 16-year-old is at a party. Dad buys alcohol for all the friends. Person goes out, walks down by the river, drowns. You're held liable. I mean, it's your responsibility if something happens to people that you're providing alcohol to when you shouldn't be. Open house ordinance requires allowing the party to occur, and I think the officer and I might have a difference of opinion over what it means to allow the party to occur. I know you had the situation where just having the alcohol in the house created liability. I'm not sure that I agree with that. I think in order for this statute to be, to be found guilty under this statute, I think you'd have to be knowingly active in at least allowing it to happen. Not simply negligent in it, not simply having the alcohol there and having people show up and consume it. I think I'm over my limits, so question and answer time.
What if they refuse to take the BBT?
If they refuse to take the PBT, so are we roadside?
Roadside.
If you're pulled over on the roadside and they have reason to ask you to take a PBT, which is sometimes a question, you're going to be arrested and taken to the station where they will read you the implied consent advisory, and you're going to have to then take the next breath test. But it's the official breath test. It's what I would recommend people do anyway. I wouldn't take roadside tests. But that's just because they will be used against you, regardless of how you do. It's a very subjective test, and this is, I have no doubt that Officer Hubbard has a difference of opinion on this one. But from my perspective, defending people, I want to give them as little information as possible. So if you do the field sobriety tests, it's the officer's subjective impression of how you did on those field sobriety tests that goes into the report. And that's what's going to be told to a jury later on. If you don't do those tests, nobody can tell about them.
But if you refuse the PBT, they may take you to the station and compel your breath test.
They most likely will take you to the station, at which point they're going to read you the implied consent advisory, which tells you that you're going to be asked to take a test, and refusing that test is a crime. And you have the right to contact a lawyer before taking that test, which you should always do.
Contact a lawyer, but you should always do.
You should always contact a lawyer.
How about taking the test? What are the general guidelines for when you take that test at the station?
You almost always should take the test at the station. There's very, very limited numbers of reasons why you wouldn't take that test, the least of which is if you don't take the test, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to fight about it later. Your standard completely changes. You should always take the test at the station, but you shouldn't do the field sobriety tests, in my opinion.
The passenger, when the youths are pulled over for some reasonable grounds, and there's some smell in the car, the driver's clean, can the passengers refuse the PBT at that time?
I believe you can always refuse a PBT, and Officer Hubbard agrees with me.
What happens if you refuse? Are those refusers going to be taken to the station and given some other test?
That's a great question, and I will defer to Officer Hubbard on that.
Yeah, the only caveat I would have is, obviously a cop and a defense attorney are going to have some differences of opinion about things, and this isn't the debate. The only thing I would say as an overriding theme is, and I'll go back to my house party example. The officers in this town, who, as you all, I'm sure, are very aware, very aggressively enforce traffic laws. I get no bonus, I get no benefit, and frankly go home often after a day of stopping cars with a huge headache because I'm the worst person in the world. All of this stuff around our enforcement of alcohol laws with juveniles or other is not related to I benefit a ton because I've arrested somebody for DWI. Because basically what I've done is created 3 to 5 hours of work for myself and potential court time and a lot of other things away from my family, etc. So my only caveat would be simply to clarify that I get nothing for doing that. My goal is to get people to and from their places safely and make sure they're okay. So the answer to the question is, if I have a car full of juveniles and I have reason to believe that there has been alcohol consumption, my job at that point is to make sure that I get those people somewhere safely. So if somebody refuses a PBT, if I have enough other articulable things, and there are plenty of them, to issue them a citation, I'm going to issue them a citation for consumption regardless of having the PBT. If I think that this situation is not safe, I'm going to detain them there and I'm going to figure out how I'm going to get them home safely. That is the goal. My goal is to get them somewhere safely. So I can't answer that because I need to be standing at that car at that time to determine what is that situation. But that's my goal.
Are you checking IDs right away to find out the ages before you do all these other steps so that if they're not a juvenile, you wouldn't give them the breath test if they're a passenger and they're 21 years old?
As a general rule, police officers will identify anybody that they come in contact with as the first order of business, period. If I have reason to have contact with you, I want to know who you are. And then, again, I can't, and I would argue, some may argue differently, my partners don't walk around with a PBT and say, blowing this. I have to be able to articulate why I have made contact with this person. What illegal activity do I have reasonable suspicion to believe is occurring? And then from there, why do I believe that this person maybe is either impaired or has been consuming? Once I can articulate that, that's when I would ask them for the PBT. So, do we take carloads of kids out and PBT them? Sure, that happens. But each one of them, I have to be able to articulate autonomously what created the circumstance that allowed that to happen. Did I answer your question, sir?
Well, I guess so. And if you're at the home and there's 15 kids and they let you in because they let you in, and if there's any kid in there, fair game, if you will, because they're a kid and you see a couple of beer cans in on the coffee table, does that give you grounds to PBT or whatever all the kids in the home?
I don't know that I would go so far as to say that. You know, if there's 10 of you in this room and you're minors, the fact that you're there doesn't necessarily make you guilty of any crime.
Everybody who's there?
Is it potential? Sure. Would I say that as a blanket statement? Not necessarily.
You have absolutely every right to say, I'm not going to do the PBT.
I have no way to force them to blow in the PBT. And then we go based on what else we have, how we're going to do it. And again, simply keeping in mind, because I'm the bad guy, my job's not to, I could care less if I never arrest another DWI. My goal is I want people going home safely. That's the bottom line. And that's what we're doing there, contrary to what people think when they get the phone call that this happened to your kid, come and pick them up. So it's, the what ifs become difficult because, you know, in 6 years of working on the road, the circumstances in each one of those cars is different every time. And so that's where it becomes hard for me to articulate what's going to happen.
I don't know if this is a question for any of you or maybe Bruce. Are these laws for juveniles told to the kids anywhere during the school year or day so that they get this blatantly in front of their face? This is a pretty small subset of the Edina High School parents. And it'd be interesting to, you know, as many times as you tell a kid something, who knows how many times they hear it, especially if it comes from mom and dad, it's probably not true. So multiple other people telling it. I don't know, is this done anywhere?
We do not necessarily go over this in a homeroom setting with kids. We do have an opening day session where I talk about a lot of the rules from texting to social media to the evils of alcohol.
Yeah.
But it's not explicit anywhere.
Okay. I mean, this is a nice little document, and I think you're right on the whole curfew thing. I know we've always enforced it to go pick them up at an after party because we didn't want them driving, but I think you're right. I even thought that maybe they were okay to drive because it was homecoming, it was prom, and so I think just letting them know that it might, not that they're going to come back and tell their parents, hey, guess what, we learned some new laws and I shouldn't be doing this, but I think the impact, as you said, on sports, theater, probably has more of an impact than anything else than, oh, damn it, I got caught. Sometimes, so if there's any way to interweave that somehow, I'm not saying it's
like high school league rules, we do go over that with all of our.
Right, I know they have to sign off on that, but, okay, thanks.
Hi, I agree with you on the party bus. The reason the party buses started, I think, was just to get this group of kids without a lot of kids driving. Do you have any other suggestions? Because I hate them too.
I'm supposed to repeat the question for the camera. The question is, my statement about party buses, is there any suggestions of what else to do because that's trying to keep people from driving drunk or impaired?
Or just driving.
Or driving that late, or sure. And I guess for me, the question comes back to, you know, what supervision is happening around the party bus. Where's the bus going? Who's there when the students are getting on? Who's there when the students are getting off? So it's not the party bus itself. I mean, just like having 100 students at your house for a party is not inherently bad. It's the stuff that can happen inside of that party that becomes bad. I would say the same thing is true with the party bus. The difference often is there is no supervision on that bus for what's happening. Does that mean a parent should be on the bus? People have to make that call for themselves and how much they want to argue with their young people. But I think paying attention to who's getting on the bus, who's getting off the bus, you know, a parent standing at that bus when people are getting on and standing at that bus when people are getting off sends a message. And it doesn't have to be spoken. it's just observed, similar to having someone standing at the door, you know, as people are coming in. I don't know if...
Yeah, we've kind of struggled with that ourselves. One of the things we've done for the last 2 parties for my senior son is we've actually, my husband and I have dropped a car at the school because he found the whole group that he was with, or the majority of them, wanted to go on the party bus and go back and then just sit at the house. And he was really having fun at the party, and that's where I want him, is at the school supervised party. So after that happened to him once, he said, well, maybe I should have a car so I have an option. And so that is what we did the last time, and he really liked that idea. If your kid's driving, or if they're not driving, then have them give you a call, and you know, they can stay out the party, they can join the after party later. But my understanding is the reason he didn't want to go back on the party bus was not because he disapproved of what was going on, although he may have. He didn't say anything about that. It was more he didn't want to leave the party that was supervised and go sit somewhere else. So that's one suggestion that worked for our family.
Another question?
Well, I'll just share something party bus related. My sister, her son is in 11th grade at Minnetonka High School, and they were on a party bus. All the parents are there taking pictures before homecoming. They check the bags, you know, they do their due diligence, everything that we've talked about here today. What the parents didn't know is that the party bus swung through the Target parking lot, so some of the kids could hop out, grab some booze from their cars, hop back on the party bus, and continue on their way. They didn't even go to the dance.
My niece was on the same bus.
Oh.
Yeah.
And they ruined the whole party for them. They called all the parents, and that was it for homecoming. Minnetonka, they all went home.
Wow.
No
Yes.
dance, nothing.
So, I mean, you can be there when they get on, when they get off, but it is, the
Yeah.
bus driver is just that, a bus driver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you to clarify one thing that's been a source of debate in our house? They can't pull you over just because they think you're, if she's driving past curfew, which isn't supposed to happen anyway, they can't just pull you over because they think you're under 18. They have to have a reason. They can't pull you over just because they think you're under 18.
You want to answer that first, Ed?
Pick your poison. From my perspective, they can pull you over. The question is, essentially, what can the police pull you over for? Can they pull you over for looking like you're 17? The answer is yes. They can pull you over for anything they want. They can pull you over because you failed to signal a turn. They can pull you over because they think you touched a fog line. They can pull you over because they think you're 16. Any reason that they can articulate is a reason that they can pull you over. Now, do they? Probably sometimes more than others, but I'm sure Officer Hubbard would disagree with me a little bit. But when you're driving at 2:30 in the morning and you're coming home from your after party, they can really stop you for any reason they want to, simply because they think maybe that you've committed or are committing or maybe have committed or whatever. They can pull you over, I think. Officer Hubbard?
Yeah, I don't know that I would differ much. One of the things, again, remember I had a whole nother life, so I made this change in my adult world, and so most of my friends are not cops, and so they've been fascinated by this journey and the things I've learned. And one of the things that I tell people is, if I'm following you for probably a mile or two, you will give me an absolute legal traffic reason to stop you. There's just, we just are not, we either are not good drivers or do not drive good cars. And so I would agree that if I can articulate that young person looked like they were under the age of curfew, then a law has been broken. But if not, I mean, certainly we know we have plenty of 16, 17-year-olds who look 25. If I follow behind you, which, as you probably all have experienced, if you're driving around at 2 o'clock in the morning, nothing good happens after midnight, I'm going to follow you for a while because I don't know where you're coming from. And I'm going to find a tail light out. You're not going to signal. You're not going to come to a full stop. You're going to go 35 in a 30. You're going to do something, and we're going to go at it that way. So I don't think I would disagree that if I can articulate that you really look young, I'll make that stop. If I can't, then I'll need to find something else.
Can you also talk about texting and using your phone? I mean, do you see kids texting or seeing, how is that played out?
Yes.
Is that,
The question is, how are we seeing a lot of students texting and using their phone? The law, as it reads right now, is that nobody can use electronic devices, adults either, for texting or browsing your computer or whatever, reading emails, yeah, all that kind of stuff. The law is expanded for those under 18, where you may not use a cell phone unless it's to make an emergency call. So if you look like you're under 18 and you're on the phone, you can be stopped for that.
is that a ticket too, or how's that?
That is a citable. Yep, that's a state driving statute.
I didn't think we had talked about that, so I wanted to add that in.
And yes, the answer, any cop you'll talk to will tell you that the issue of handheld devices for everybody, all of us, has become a humongous problem, and I would say makes up for a lot of the crashes that we see nowadays.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Officer Hubbard, in a situation where parents are out of town, kid invites a couple friends over, it goes out on the text, on the Facebook, now you got 100 people over, there's alcohol coming in, there's marijuana being smoked. Can we instruct our kids that if we're not available to call the police themselves? Will they get some sort of safe passage or immunity, or will they be cited?
That's a good question.
The question is, if the parents are out of town and the student invites a couple people over, which turns into a house party with alcohol or drugs being used, should they call the police? I'm going to answer that question two ways. The first one would be, one of the reasons that this uniform, anytime I walk into this building with this uniform on, people make comments about, oh, wow, wearing the big guns. There's a reason that I don't wear this uniform. One of the things that we do in society is we paint cops as bad folks, and we do it at a very young age. I'm a tangent here, but I'll get to the point. If I walk into Cub like this tonight and somebody is with their 3-year-old, that parent almost always will make some comment about, you behave yourself, or you stop grabbing stuff off the shelf, or he's going to take you. We've all done it. I get the context. I have 3 little ones who are often very annoying. The problem is, at a very young age, we've given the message that this uniform is here to get you any way that they can. The reason that I'm in plain clothes in this building is because I want students to see me as just another member of this team who's just here to help them, not to intimidate them or scare them. To that end, my answer is going to be yes. If a student is in a situation where it's out of control and they can't handle it, I want them to know that they have to call us so that we can help them with that. That's our goal. The people that I work with, I hope you haven't experienced differently, are reasonable folks. The Edina folks, I can't talk for anybody else, but the Edina cops that I work with are reasonable folks. I'm going to argue, for me at least, if your son or daughter calls me and says, hey, I was having some people over, this got out of control, I need some help with this, and we show up there, that's going to take very high consideration, because what more of a responsible decision could you want? Now, I say that as a broad-based statement. Does that mean that your child doesn't get cited? I'd hesitate to make that statement if there's illegal activity that happens. What would I do in that case? I'm probably going to say, hey, mom or dad, here's what happened. It got out of control. They've been drinking. I need someone to take responsibility for them, but they made the right choice after that. So we're gonna call that good on that. Can I speak for all of my partners that they would do that? I can't. But I think the answer to young people would be, yeah, you have to know that you still got to do the right thing. And you still got to make sure that, this, again, it's out of control. I didn't expect it. So it's maybe a varied answer, but it's the best I can give you. I think most of my partners would strongly take that into consideration in kind of how things were handled.
Another question?
Well, just to follow up on that, you'd have to fill out a report, and then it would be out of your discretion to charge. It's up to the city attorney at that point, right? You're writing down what happened, including the name of the child who asked for help, and then they become a...
No, that's not necessarily how charging works. The city attorney will determine charging basically based on, I'm basically going to make the recommendation on charging. It would be a very rare circumstance in this particular situation that that the city attorney is going to read that and say, we're going to charge this person. One of two things will happen. Either I will issue a citation, which is a charge, to whoever I issue a citation to at that time, or I will say, I'd like the city attorney to review this for charging. In a house party situation, it would be incredibly rare that the latter of those two would happen, because the city attorney is not there to make that determination. So rarely do we defer to the city attorney to make the decision that the officer should be making on scene. Has it happened? I'm sure it has, but that would be very, very rare.
Another question? If a child is on a party bus or at a house party and they're not drinking or smoking pot, but the party has illegal activity and it's busted, are they guilty by association through Edina or through the school?
No. You're guilty for what you do or have control over. The one exception that I think Ed talked about is if you're driving a vehicle in Minnesota, by definition, if you're driving the vehicle, regardless of your age, you're responsible for what's happening in that vehicle.
And the school views it the same way too, like with sports and things?
Not necessarily with sports. There's an exclusion in the Minnesota State High School League with code of conduct.
Okay.
And so it could be treated as such that the child would be suspended from that activity for 2 weeks or 2 events.
And then how would the school find out if my child was at a party, wasn't drinking, the party got busted, he's clear with the police, so does he get reported to the school?
No. I do that, and we only report, we're required. I mean, there's some privacy issues there with juveniles. So if you say, hey, did Ed Kid get arrested last week? I can't tell you that because he's a juvenile. That's private information. By statute, I'm required to notify the school of violations of chemical use. And so if there's nothing I can charge him with for being in the room while it's happening. So if there's no offense, we've charged him with nothing, so there's nothing to report to the school.
So how does the code of conduct ever get broken then?
Students or sometimes self-reporting, or other kids report their students report.
Oh, okay.
So how does the code of conduct get broken? Someone comes in to Dr. Locklear and says, hey, this happened, or to the coach or whatever, hey, my teammate who took the same pledge that I did used this weekend, and then they talk to students and investigate from there. Right, but not from us. We only notify of actual violations.
Would that be confidential?
Yes.
Question back to the curfew. Like, I'm thinking of the after parties. So say you have a child, okay, so if they're a senior and they're driving, they don't want mom and dad to go pick them up at whatever time when the after party's over. They're not drinking, they're not using anything, but they are driving home after curfew, and if they do get pulled over, what is the violation, or what do they get? What happens?
Well, if they're a senior and they're...
Repeat the question.
Sorry. The question is, what happens to somebody driving home and it's a curfew violation? If they're a senior and they're under 18, it's going to be a petty misdemeanor. You're looking at, it's same as a parking or a speeding ticket. It's not a moving violation, though, but it's not a criminal offense because you can't go to jail, but it's a finable offense. The big piece of it is that it opens the door to having police conduct, which can open the door to all kinds of other things. So the curfew violation is kind of the gateway drug to getting into all kinds of other trouble.
How much is a ticket for curfew, like underage?
I think it's $50.
50. I like to put
Could
money
be.
I don't know. I just write them, I don't collect the money.
Well, no, I know.
A petty misdemeanor is less than $300, so.
Good to know. We have time for like one more question. Anyone? Oh, we'll take two more.
I don't know if this is for parents or police, but I'd like a little guidance on chaperoning. If you encounter kids, I've been at large parties, I'm among several parents, I'm not the only parent. You kick the bottle of 7-Up on the ground, it's not a bottle of 7-Up, you know to dump that out. When you encounter kids who reek of pot, they're gonna stay for a few hours, what would you suggest? I don't personally think I'm gonna call their parents, what do I do in that situation?
Yeah, your question is if you encounter a kid at your house that is impaired in what other way, drinking pot or something, and they're already at the party. I did.
At my house.
Right, at somebody else's. At my house, I did, looking out the window, they were having a fire. Kids were coming around the sides of the house. This was in the fall, so they weren't in the house. But I was looking out the window, and I saw somebody walking somebody back and forth that was clearly inebriated. And you can use the text to your advantage. I texted my son and said, "Get the heck in here." And said, you know, I don't even want to know who it is, but this child needs to be taken home by somebody who is sober, because I don't want them found on my property. The problem being is the social host thing. I mean, they didn't get it there. But I also don't want a reputation that, oh, hey, I was really stoned at the Satterthwaites on Saturday. Yeah, not a great reputation. So that was a case where I said to my own son, I did make him be proactive, and I said, if you don't do it, I will.
And if it's not my house, then do I go to the home?
I definitely would. Yeah, no, I definitely would, and then it really is sort of up to them, I suppose, because it's their house. But, yeah.
Yeah, I would only add, I don't want to be beating a dead horse here, but I would reiterate that the goal is the safety of our young people. That's the goal. And so, you know, each situation is different, but, you know, if someone's hosting a party, if I'm hosting a party, if they've asked you to be there, that obviously is probably a good step that they're trying to be diligent about it. I think I'm going to say, hey, that guy right there, that might be something you want to try and figure out. So, again, the goal is not to bust people, it's not to get everybody in trouble, it's to make sure that people move around safely. I'm not the liability expert, but I'm going to say that criminally or civilly, you could argue there's no liability. I might make a broader statement that morally there's a responsibility, but I don't. Certainly, we don't deal in civil law. But if the statement is they showed up, you knew they were inebriated, you told them to get out, we're not going to charge you with something. And I'm hard pressed to believe that there's a civil lawsuit that's going to make it very far if that's the circumstance. Agree with that?
That's right. I would agree with that. You don't have liability for people showing up to your house and then kicking them out. You do create the situation. You're knowingly sending somebody out who's under the influence of something, and bad things can happen then, but you don't have any civil liability, I don't believe.
Oh, we have time for one more question. Was there one?
I just wanted to add one thing. I've actually used a lot of Anne's suggestions over the years for house parties, especially hosting after parties. And the one thing that I've always done when we host an after party, first we're always there greeting them, like you said, but I tell everybody, kids and parents included, that I'm happy to have 30, 40 kids at my house. Just so you know, when their bags get dropped off at my house, because they're all going to change, it is my right to look through every bag.
Yeah. And
I have. And I've never once had one parent say, you can't do that. The kids all know up front that, hey, I'm going to go through your bags so I know what you're bringing in. And I've never had anybody complain about it. Never had anybody say we're not coming to your house anymore. And that's just the way it is.
I think we're going to end our talk this evening. I thought it was really informative and helpful, and our speakers did a great job, so let's give them a nice round of applause. So thank you for coming tonight, and you know, hopefully this will be on channel 16 for City of Edina Access, and take some, if you want to take any extra brochures and give them to any friends, that would be great. Thank you.